Well, good morning and welcome to this edition of What in the World is Going On. And boy, what's going on here is rain. We're out about 70 or 80 miles north of Dallas, and it's pouring down rain. It's supposed to be pouring down rain for the next several days. Oh well, gives us a good opportunity to stay inside and just listen to it rain. I had oh, by the way, I want to express my gratitude. You know, this program goes, believe it or not, all over the world, a lot of different places, and I can check onto the stats a day or so after a program is aired and see what country. Now, there's an IP number, but I have no way of checking that, but we can see what country folks are from, and it's amazing how many people visit with us from Italy. We even get visitors from the Islamic Republic of Iran and have several from North Korea, however that works. At any rate, we pray for those people, and I don't know what they get out of it, how far they listen or delve into anything we talk about. Immaterial. Fact is that they are being exposed to it. Now, I had a guy send an email in, and he said, "Okay, this program is called, the address is www.whatshappening.news, and you don't talk a whole lot about news." Well, if you go onto the podcast, onto the website, you can go back, I don't know, several weeks, and you'll find that we've done programs on Iran, on this circus that we have as a political presidential campaign going on right now. A number of different things that are based in a news format. At this point in time, we just happen to be talking about another issue that someone asked about, and that's ghosties. What are ghosts? Do they exist? And so on and so on like this. But in talking about that, I was checking the polls, and I don't understand a lot about politics. In fact, I don't understand nothing about politics. My dad told me early on in life that politics was the art of compromise. And over the years, I found out that's exactly right. The only just by way of interest, the only politics I was ever involved in 1967, I was in college at New Mexico State University, and I was taking a course in political science. And this was the time when, during a political or presidential campaign, and Hubert Humphrey was involved in it and so forth. The point is that George Wallace of Alabama was running for president. And of course, I'm from North Alabama. That's where I was raised. That's my ancestral homeland. Don't agree with everything there, but most of it. At any rate, our assignment was to get involved in the political activity somehow, and always having a tendency to jump in and get my head underwater, and so forth. I ended up as the state vice president for the American Independent Party, and introduced George Wallace when he came to Albuquerque, and so forth. That was my only delving into politics. I decided then, this ain't for me. But at any rate, in looking at the polls now, we can see in the Fox News poll for the Democratic polls, Clinton's 48, Sanders is 46. I don't understand that, and I have no like for Hillary Clinton. I don't trust her. I think she's a liar and a criminal and so forth, but that's my opinion. I think she would look very good in an orange jumpsuit. Because if she were elected president, I think we can pretty well kiss this country goodbye. I think we would lose a lot of our freedoms. Certainly gun rights would be challenged and so forth. But Bernie Sanders, come on. Socialist? If anybody with a brain wants to look at socialism and see what it's like, look at Hitler. Look at the USSR. Russia is a socialist, or when it was the USSR, I don't know what it is now. But anyway, it was a socialist regime. If Bernie Sanders were to be elected president, and I don't see any way that he could do it, but if he were, then we'd all have about the same job. It'd be dictated by the government, probably wear funny-looking brown work shirts, I guess. But anyway, we would certainly not have freedoms like we have now. The idea of capitalism would go out the window and so forth if he had his plate. First place, if he were elected president, he'd never get any of that done. But at any rate, and then looking at the Republican campaign, it's as we probably figured, all of you did. The NBC poll shows Trump at 54, Kasich at 25, Cruz at 16. I think John Kasich will probably make a good president. I don't know that he has a chance unless something weird happens in maybe a brokered convention or whatever. But at any rate, it's a strange world, and that's about all we're going to talk about politics. Now, we'll be back after this break, and we're going to get into today's subject on are ghosts, or is it possible that when you die, that you can get trapped in between the fourth dimensional world? I mean, obviously, when your body dies, you got to get out of it. It's no longer, it's like a rundown house for whatever reason. It's no longer fit for human occupation. And so you move out of it. You can't move back into your body because it still won't support life. And so is it possible to get hung up somewhere between exiting your body and going to wherever your eternal destiny is? And as far as I can determine, there is no purgatory. There is no halfway point. There's not a halfway house where you go and sit and wait on getting a ticket or whatever to go in. Your ticket's already punched before you leave this body, and you either go to heaven or hell. At any rate, we're going to talk about that and try to lay that to rest. Try to make it an interesting program, and we'll be back shortly. Well, welcome back after enjoying that nifty lead-in to this portion of the program. We're discussing the probability or possibility of a person, a human being actually able to get trapped between death and wherever he's headed, his eternal destiny and so forth. And we've pretty well surmised it can't happen. There's some scriptures that, if I look at my notes here, my memory ain't what it used to be. But that kind of lay this to rest. In Hebrews, the 9th chapter, verse 27, it states that it's appointed unto man once to die, and after that, the judgment. Now that seems to indicate there's no time period between the two. It's not absolute, but that seems to be the case. Another one that is in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 8, says that to be absent from the body is to be present from the Lord. Now that's a little bit more absolute in what it's saying. Paul says that. He says that if you're not in your body, you're going to be with the Lord if you're a born-again believer. Now if you're not, then the opposite of that is obviously if you're not in your body, you're going to be with somebody else. But it's not going to be walking around in an old house or a cemetery here on the earth aggravating people. We're going to find out who those folks are before our series is over with, but that's not this case. Now, I think one of the most absolute proofs of this has to do with, in fact, it's found in Luke the 16th chapter, 22nd verse, and several verses there. Jesus is telling the story. Now, people say that this is a parable. I'm not sure whether it's a parable or not, because it sort of breaks the context of a parable. In things that are obviously parables, there are no proper names used for the individuals. But in this case, Jesus uses the name of Lazarus, who is the beggar. And so to me, that would question whether or not it's actually a parable or a true story from his spiritual understanding or knowledge that happened at some point in time. At any rate, in the case, if you've read the story, you know that Lazarus is a beggar, and he hangs around outside this rich man's kitchen or house or whatever, just begging for scraps that fall from the table. And a lot of times the dogs would pick those up ahead of him, and in some cases evidently had some boils or whatever on his body. It paints a pretty gruesome picture. But it says when he dies, he instantly is in the arms of Abraham. In the bosom of Abraham is what it calls in the Bible. Now, this is a reference to what's termed paradise. This is, or was, the holding place for the righteous dead before Jesus was resurrected and ascended into heaven and opened the door for human beings who had been redeemed to actually enter into heaven, not paradise, a place that typically is believed to have been housed in the center part of the earth, probably not in the third dimension, but in another dimension, a spiritual dimension. Now, point. It says that the rich man died, and in hell, absolutely no room for any time period there. The rich man died, and in hell he lifted up his eyes. Now, that pretty well, I think, lays it to rest as far as this question of there being a time period. In the Roman Catholic Church, they call it purgatory. I have no idea where they get that from. I don't think it's scriptural. But various other religions and so forth seem to have a holding area defined in their journey from the time that they actually exit the human body until they step into their eternity. Well, that's my opinion, and if you have any differing views or would like to discuss it more, I invite you to send me an email with your comments and your questions on it. Send it to rturnerauthor@gmail.com. That's rturnerauthor@gmail.com, and I will reply. All right, we're going to take a break now, then we'll be back and wrap this thing up in just a minute. What happens when you die? Does everything suddenly go black? Do you lose all sense of self-awareness? Does your human essence suddenly cease to exist? Or do you suddenly drop into darkness, but are still aware of all that's around you? Does your sense of self suddenly explode into horror, fear, and undefinable pain? Are you aware that this is your eternity? Or are you instantly wrapped in light, immersed in a sense of love and acceptance? Are you suddenly surrounded by your long-lost departed family and friends? Well, this story presents that the first choice is non-existent, but choice 2 and 3 are real. Which one you experience is totally up to you. Travel along with two men. Follow their choices into the afterlife and experience the vast contrast. Then clearly see what made the difference. Join me for Life After Death, a tale of two journeys. You can get your copy by logging on to my website at www.turnerbooks.info. www.turnerbooks.info. Soon available as an Audible book from audible.com, iTunes, and Amazon. Now back to our program. Okay, to close out this session, let me give you a couple of interesting sources that you might look at. Now, this is by far the best one. It's a book I wrote called Life After Death, A Tale of Two Journeys. Now, it's a novel, but it talks about these two guys. One of them was born on the streets of Chicago back in the 1920s. The other one was born on a family farm out north of Memphis, Tennessee. Nashville, Tennessee. Sorry about that. And one obviously is living a very supportive life with his family and so forth. That's the guy in Tennessee. The other one on the streets of Chicago is, you just have to read the story to see his dilemma. But at any rate, after Pearl Harbor, they both join the military, join the Army. And they end up in Germany, and short of the story is they both end up in a German POW camp. Go through a little bit of interaction there, then they're released, they come back home. Each one goes back to their own lifestyle, and in their 80s, fast forward to the 80s, they both die. One goes to hell and one goes to heaven. So the core of the story talks about, in one case, the one that goes to heaven meets with an angel who has been assigned to introduce him to his heavenly abode. The other guy, of course, is just the opposite. He meets up with a demon, and that demon drags him through hell with a burning chain, introducing him to his heavenly or his unheavenly abode. At any rate, in this, it makes it very plain that the very instant that you depart this body, you go to the place that you've been assigned to and where you will spend your eternity. And so you'll enjoy it. Now, you can, one interesting point on this book, you can go to some of the older sessions in the audio version of this program, www.whatshappening.news, and each chapter is presented as an audio chapter with some sound effects and so forth. And you can download each one of those. I think there's like 21 chapters or 21 sessions. You can download those to your computer, listen to them later, share them with friends, and you'll end up with the Audible book free. Or you can go to Amazon.com and get a copy of it there, either as an ebook or as a paperback, and other places too, or the publisher at AmericaStarBooks.com. Now, here's another one that you might enjoy, and I'm not going to go too deep into it. It's also a novel that was written by yours truly, and it's available from Audible.com as an Audible book, or in the same places I just mentioned for the other book. At any rate, it's an interesting story. Without getting into too much of the introduction and so forth, it is a group of stories that are told by Gabriel the Archangel to a retired missionary who's trying to find what God has for him to do in the ending part of his life. So it covers stories, everything from creation to the fall of Lucifer, the fall of man, very unusual telling of the incarnation and the birth, death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus in the story form told by Gabriel the Archangel. The way the book is presented, or the story is presented, this guy, Doug Hargrove, who's the missionary from Africa, and he is telling me the story and all the stories. Even closes out, and it does cover some things about afterlife and so forth, closes out with who Bigfoot is. So I think you might enjoy that. Now, there's another book that I think you would enjoy that's called Heaven. It's by Randy Alcorn. It's just Heaven. What's Heaven Like? So forth. You can get this book. This guy gives some really unusual input on what we might expect when we cross over and go to heaven. Now, there's another one. I don't have the author's name right now, but it's you can get it by going to audible.com, and up at the right-hand corner of the thing where it says find a good book, just put in Life After Death, The Evidence. And it's a tremendous book. It's a very, it's a somewhat academic book on the proof of life after death, and you may find that one really interesting. There are a lot of other things scattered all through the internet where you can go and get some good information on what happens after death. And one thing you'll see in all of these that are credible, now you may pick up a couple of goofballs that get in there and talk about, try to present some evidence that human beings become ghosts, but you can discount all that business because they have no evidence for it. At any rate, hope you enjoy it. We'll be back next time. We're going to talk about the possibility that ghosts are fallen angels. That's a pretty common concept, and I think we can lay that to rest the same way. In the meantime, enjoy life, live in peace, be blessed.